we wonder why now as adults we're not very good at regulating emotions. Well, we've been programmed to suppress them, so that's the first one. And then we've also had modeled to us the explosion when the emotions just got to come out because it has to. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport as I see it is to see your vision become a reality, find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. Back on episode 41 of the Sport is Life podcast, I was talking about why men watch sport, the psychology of why sometimes we get stuck there watching for long periods of time. And I highlight a whole lot of different reasons why men get so much out of sport. And I want to talk in depth about those over the next weeks, months, and today starting with emotional regulation. Earlier today, I interviewed Phil Moss, the former Central Coast Mariners coach. You'll see that episode in the coming weeks or months. I'm not exactly sure when that one's going to be on, but it'll be probably about, it's probably like 2 months down the track. But he was talking about the importance of emotional regulation, how important that is for self, for navigating different situations, but also the positive influence you can have on other people in challenging situations if you have that ability to emotionally regulate on the run. And most of us, right, we haven't been taught how to regulate our emotions. In fact, we've had modeled to us very poor ways of regulating emotions. We might have been on the receiving end of anger, of frustration, of suppressing emotions by watching our parents, more often than not, particularly our fathers. They certainly weren't taught how to regulate their emotions. And actually, I remember my mum saying that she was discouraged from showing any emotion by her parents. It wasn't the done thing. I know my dad was on the receiving end of a lot of anger and frustration from his father. And I also remember my sister saying, no doubt that dad gave us a much softer version of whatever he experienced. But there's still times where his emotions would have got the better of him just because he didn't know any better. I know that was definitely the case for me for many, many years. Took it out on my children, my wife, the dog, on the football field, unsuspecting people, because I had shit going on. And I also know that watching sport was a big, big part of that. Like, people talk about that passion for their team and why do they get so angry? Well, I used to get angry, and it was disappointment at my team, but more than anything, it was because I had so much emotion that needed to come up. Every time I'd been frustrated or angry at something, I had suppressed that, pushed it down because it wasn't what you were supposed to do. The funny thing is that, we got taught, don't be angry, don't be mad. I'm sure I've talked about this on many other episodes where it's like that program we heard as children. Don't cry. It's okay. Don't be sad. Don't be angry. All those different things. And we wonder why now as adults we're not very good at regulating emotions. Well, we've been programmed to suppress them, so that's the first one. And then we've also had modeled to us the explosion when the emotions just got to come out because it has to. And men in particular seem to be on the wrong end of that, because often we need to physically get it out, and sometimes it ends in bad results. Again, if we bring it back to why we watch television, it allows us to process that emotion without it resulting in something physical. Although I do remember breaking things after watching one of my teams getting beaten. I also remember when I was trying to control my anger, getting the axe and just chopping wood just to let out all of that frustration. And you might be able to relate. But fast forward now, I've spent the last 10 plus years trying to learn as much as I can about emotions and emotional regulation and mindset and being strong mentally, emotionally. I don't always get it right. In fact, I had a bit of a tanty the other morning, but I also know that it's important for my family to see that sometimes I still get angry. And sometimes I don't regulate that emotion well. But I also know it's possible when you're able to be in control of how you're going to react. There's nothing worse than reacting in a moment in a way that you didn't want to, whether that's at home with family, whether that's in the public eye somehow, nothing worse, and then regretting it afterwards. It's awful. I've done it thousands of times. Like I said, I still get it wrong. If you learn to regulate emotions, put yourself in the right state of mind when you go into any situation and be able to regulate on the run. I remember working with a CEO a few years ago. It's probably a couple of years ago now, and he was talking about how he realized he was getting anxious in meetings. And because of the conversation we had about suppressed anger, he realized that it wasn't actually anxiety at all. It was actually he was getting frustrated. He was stuffing that frustration down. And then he was getting anxious because his body was having a reaction to this suppressed emotion. So the anxiety was actually a product of suppressing anger and frustration. And then helping him how to go through the process of being able to do that in his head, acting out maybe what he wanted to act out or say, but doing it in his head so that he could allow that emotion to flow through. Emotion, energy in motion. We want it to move. It's all about motion. And if you can learn those ways to be able to move it through in the moment, it's going to be so much more helpful. That's why meditation's so good. Because when you practice it more, because it is a practice, it is a muscle you can build, and you get better at regulating your emotions from the previous day, at the start of the day or at the end of the day. So you go into your sleep or your next day in a state where you are balanced. You're not carrying emotion from previous incidents from that day. Now, there are still things that are going to make you to react emotionally during the day, and that's why the ability to regulate in the run is so important. Again, why men are drawn to watching sport for that particular specific role of regulating emotions. They don't do it consciously. They don't know it consciously. You might be listening to this going, hey, I do that, but I didn't know that's why I watch sport. Well, again, it's not a conscious thing, but it's a huge benefit. It's why we're drawn to these big crowds, and because the emotion we get to feel. That's the other part of it, is the feeling. We've done such a good job, us men, of numbing, of suppressing, to not feel at all. We do it with drinking, we do it with gambling, we do it with sex, we do it with drugs, we do it any number of ways. Sport allows us to feel. Remember when para weren't going so well, we'd still go every week or so, and some days I'm like, oh, I can't face it today. I don't want to go today. Then I'd get there, and the energy of the crowd, and I'm like, yeah, this is why I love coming. Feels fantastic. And then with that hope of a surprise victory or just even moments through the game, nothing like it. So again, the power of sport helps you to feel, helps you to reconnect to your body, reconnect to your emotions. And the more you can learn to regulate in those moments, the better those experiences are going to be, because you're going to have all of that good stuff, but without those moments of regret afterwards when you react in a way that you didn't want to. I'm just thinking back to a particular incident where I broke something in a public setting, which I probably won't go into the details here. But again, I left that for not just for that day, but for years, feeling really foolish about what I'd done. But it was just the emotions spilling out. And I'm such a believer in patience with people when they're reacting emotionally, when they get it wrong emotionally and they react in a way they didn't want, because I know what it's like to not have been taught and to have so many big emotions come into the surface all at once in pressure situations. There's one of the tools that you may have seen if you've come across in a corporate environment. It's HBDI or something, I think it might be. And it talks about what your natural personality is and then where you go under pressure. Or mine was already in that red zone where I'm emotional and I'm connected to my emotions, other people's emotions. And under pressure, it goes even deeper there. So I'm particularly susceptible to those emotional reactions, and you might have had experiences like that yourself. So part of this series about talking about, why men watch sport for countless hours, and of course some women too. I'm not saying that's not the case. I'm just specifically talking to men because that's the majority of the people that we hear listening to the pod. So it's not condoning poor behavior. It is very much preaching the need to take responsibility, to manage your emotions, to be able to regulate your emotions. It's just going to make for a more pleasant experience for you and particularly the people around you, and less of those moments where you wish you could go back and react differently, and more of those moments where you can be proud of yourself and really happy about how you showed up and what a positive experience that was for you, and maybe someone important in your world that's watching you and that you're a role model to as well. You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.